Hey, welcome everyone. We are live right now with our episode of Veteran Nation Live. We are welcome, Mr. Coop. See you there. Uh, we are doing our normal structured show. So, just so everyone knows, we're not going to be doing anything what the hails today. So, if you have questions, comments about that, you'll have to wait till another stream that we have. But we do have an announcement, and we teased this the other day, uh, and we told you we would launch it during today's show, and I'm going to put the link right here. We have started a Give Send Go for Uncle Frank. So right here it is. We're doing a modest goal, $1,500. Now, for those of you who don't recall, Uncle Frank was one of our main viewers. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a tunnel rat, just a super nice guy. His nephew Yoda will probably be in here today. Yoda is great. Uncle Frank's been on the show, and he passed away earlier this week. So we want to honor Uncle Frank and his family. So this is going to be money straight for his family. Uh, they have a lot of costs and stuff that they've incurred. This is going to go for them to help with everything that they're doing. So during today's stream, if you are so blessed, please go and donate something to Uncle Frank's family. TC, any comments on this?
People get over there and help. Take your orders in March. That's where you can.
Absolutely.
Yoda is a good friend of the show. Uncle Frank was a good friend of the show, and he would not want us to drag this on forever. And he would actually probably want us at some point to start making fun of him. And that, and I think everybody knows that. But let's help out. Let's help out Yoda and family, and do it in the memory of Uncle Frank. And let's bring in our guest.
All right. Let me stop the screen share. Sorry, got too much here. All right. So, our guest today is the son of Ba Van Nguyen, who was one of the last people out of Vietnam. He was part of a 2015 Oscar nominated documentary, and he is here to promote his father's memoirs. So I do want to thank you for being here. But ladies and gentlemen, welcome Miki Nguyen.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity here, Mike and TC, to share my family story, my dad's story with regards to the Vietnam War, and this year marks the 50th remembrance of the fall of Saigon, April 29th, April 30th, 1975, and so again, just really honored to be here to share the story with your audience.
Excellent, welcome. So let's talk a little bit about the story. Can you give us a little bit of an intro?
Should I hop into the presentation?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's go. I think, as I noted to you earlier, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and so let's pull it up.
There we go.
So as Mike noted a few minutes ago, about 10 years ago, I was involved in an Oscar-nominated film. Really honored to represent my dad and my family in this particular story. In this particular film, written and produced by Rory Kennedy, the youngest daughter of Robert F. Kennedy, the same Robert F. Jr. today. And so, the film is called Last Days in Vietnam, and had the chance to share the story. So many different groups, so many different audiences. But today, really proud and happy to launched this memoir that for many years my dad wrote in stories, short stories that were published in various Vietnamese newspapers, not only here in Seattle where we reside, but also other parts of major cities with you know, the Vietnamese veteran communities. And so in the past few years, got the chance to find many of my dad's work documents and compiled it together, got it translated. So there's actually two versions, the original Vietnamese version and then the translated version, both of which are released this year. So this was a story in our family that's been told around the dinner tables growing up after leaving Saigon in a pretty dramatic way. And so yeah, let me just go right into the
Sure.
next. So this kind of frames up a little bit of the history behind
I've
things.
put the link to the book and to your website in the chat, so everyone, please, if you're so inclined, go purchase.
Yeah. I'm sure many of your audience knows, a little bit about the Vietnam War, but for those that may not be completely familiar, let me just give you the context behind it. So Vietnam, Southeast Asia, thousands of years, in the past few hundred years, have been the land close to the oceans, very desirable location. Rich in mineral and other resources, and so it's been occupied by China and France, Japan came, occupied it, and more recent in history here, been taken over, struggle with fighting back the communist tide activity, and so my dad was part of the South Vietnamese military, and the effort here was to push back communism, and mainly from the north, supported by Russia back then. And so in the early days, my dad got the opportunity to early 60s, mid 60s, got the chance to come to the U.S. A couple times, trained in Alabama, flying helicopters. And so this was his early life in terms of just military and his service to his country, and the desire, the heart to maintain and keep, independence and freedom. And that was what his early career was, pure military. And so towards the as the U.S. pulled out a few years earlier, there were still a lot of military troops in Saigon and American personnel. And in the film Last Days in Vietnam, it's on Netflix, but as the communists came further down and encircled the city, the main metropolitan city of Saigon, basically all hell broke loose. And at this moment in time, folks are trying to figure out some way to get out of the country. And so
Mickey, if I could, I think this is like the last days are obviously very important because so much changed in Vietnam leading up to the last days, and then also as Saigon fell. But who was your dad prior to the outbreak of the war? Between the communist North and Ho Chi Minh's actions, and like how did he end up getting to a place where he was being picked to be? Was he military minded as a young man? Was it something that just kind of happened? Was it was he conscripted? what led him to that place where he ended up in the Vietnamese, at least in the Vietnamese military, and then ended up coming to the States to learn to fly? Because that's a intriguing story, and I don't think a lot of people recognize or even know uh, how prolific the training of American service or Vietnamese service members was by the American military. I think there's a kind of a misconception that the Americans just kind of showed up and worked with a military that was already there, and then worked with the Hmong and whatnot, and the longer the war went on. But this partnership had been going on for a while. And how did your dad end up in that position?
Well, there was that's a great question. So in his early teens or late teens, after finishing up high school, the early 60s here, grew up, seeing that Vietnam, and he told me stories where, as a young boy, he had to, with his younger brother on his back, carrying his back, running away from Japanese that came and the Japanese military came and had to run away from the fighting and the shooting that the Japanese folks, the military, had occurred, and so the desire to fend off foreign folks that wanted to control, his people, was really the motive for him to continue to want to fight off, and basically participate and join the military. And
He had to have been a very young man, very, very young when Japan invaded during World War II.
yeah, a young boy. I don't mean to make it sound like he was a teenage, but he, born in 1940, so probably the mid 50s there, around that time frame. But he, obviously he went to for testing and was qualified, and they was selected to take the next step in terms of getting the opportunity to come to the U.S. and train. So the love of country, love of just national pride around that, I think, gave him the motivation and the inspiration to move forward into military. And the country itself, big struggle in terms of his own brothers, his from the north, wanting to.
Did he
And,
have
and, and then
family that were enticed by the rise of communism in the area? Or
yeah.
Interesting.
There are friends and family that were enticed, as you would say, and even to the very last day, towards the April 29th, many in the book that he noted, many of the his buddies were also enticed to change sides in the last moment. So very difficult time from that standpoint to just judge whose heart was in the right place, right?
yeah, and to have it be friends and family members, and they, there are very interesting similarities in the conflict in Vietnam between the North and the South, and the division less about less along geographical lines and more along ideological lines.
Yeah.
And the division in the United States in the 1860s, where we had literally family members fighting each other if you will, along that Mason-Dixon line, and I use that just as that division between North and South here, that I think a lot of people, miss. Obviously, there's vastly different political ideologies at play in both countries, Vietnam and the United States. But unlike a lot of other places where we have seen the United States get involved,
Mm-hmm.
there is just a very strong similarity between
Yeah.
the division, and it wasn't as cut and dried, I think, as a lot of people will see it. Like, oh, the North Vietnamese were all communists and the South Vietnamese were all freedom loving, capitalists. Like, it was a spread of people, and those that were in the northern side, the northern half of the country, the northern portion of the country, weren't all communists. They just happened to get caught there.
All right.
And there were communists in the South. And
Yep, that's exactly right.
and it was a very harrowing time for the Vietnamese themselves. We think the American troops had it rough. It's,
I think for the audience, just putting themselves in his position, a life where the first half of your life is in almost a constant state of war and a constant state of survival.
Right.
Yeah. And TC, when you mentioned, that divide, we see that here in America today, where right now the strife between red and blue, left and right, Democrat, Republican, it's brutal at times. The back and forth. It's yeah. So
the thing is, and you know that because you've obviously grown up here in the States, but I think there are times where we find ourselves immune. We think we're immune to that ever happening here again. Like that's something that happens in other countries. That's something that happened way in our past, and we're over that now. And it's way back over there, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. And I look at the story of your father and of Vietnam as a whole, and I'm just like, people, I don't like. We we got to do better. we really, because we could end up there. We really could
Yeah,
if we're not
exactly.
careful. I didn't mean to disrupt your train. That's a lie. I did, because otherwise I wouldn't have asked. But
Ask away, no problem. No, I hope I answered your question in terms of just where his heart is and where his mindset is. He grew up at a very young age, just seeing things that you shouldn't see as a young kid growing up. War, blood, dismemberment, all of that stuff. And yeah.
Oh, it's like living in Chicago. Sorry.
Yeah.
We sometimes crack jokes here just because if you don't, it's like
I know.
You get into some of these stories and it's just like I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, it can get pretty heavy.
Yeah, it can get. Well, Skipper and I, over on my channel, and Skipper we put it up here on Veteran Nation. We interviewed several of the survivors of the USS Liberty. And man, thank the good Lord that those guys had, even in the midst of telling their story, had a sense of humor, because you just have to, otherwise it's just like it'll just literally sink you.
Yeah.
So before I interrupted you and asked the question about your dad, how he got involved, he had to have been a guy of some intellectual prowess to get picked to come to learn to fly American military aircraft, because I don't want to say we only allow the best of the best to fly, because we do let Marines fly from time to time, but
not me.
But that had to have been a kind of a big deal for him. I can't imagine he was like proficiently bilingual to a point where he was interchanging between American English and Vietnamese and all of its dialects. And so that's a big challenge, to pick somebody up from Vietnam and bring him over here and say, oh yeah, welcome to the United States. Learn to fly our American aircraft.
Mm. I'm a little bit biased, but yeah, my dad, smart,
That's fine.
smart man, a lot smarter than me. Hardworking, all of those traits that I admire. But in terms of getting the opportunity, yeah, he explained it basically as just winning the lottery. Mind you, my his father, his mom and dad, originally grew up in this countryside, country farming, and so for him, you know, getting an opportunity to go through testing and making sure you're the right height and the intellectual and cleverness, all of that, fully tested, fully vetted before they would allow him to go into training and get the opportunity to come to Fort Rucker and get the opportunity to be an American and fly
So
with
your
the
so your
best.
grandparents weren't the bourgeoisie, like you're
No,
teaching as professors or something at some
no,
university or
no, they
some
were farmers.
bureaucrats. They were now at the risk of being like really white and from Minnesota. Were they rice farmers or
Uh,
what were
yeah,
they?
my dad told stories of him, tending to oxen and all that stuff. So we
Wow.
came from basically nothing from that standpoint. And so it was my grandma, his mom, that saw the opportunity to lift the family up and move into the city as time moved on and get out of the countryside. So
So your grandmother and grandfather picked the family up, moved them from what I would imagine was probably a hundreds of years worth of living on ancestral land
yes, absolutely.
and move them to a city. What city did they settle in?
A Saigon, just
Okay.
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
So
A little.
they literally picked up and moved. Like I don't know if people understand this even to this day, but back then Saigon was a massive city.
Bigger today,
Yeah,
sprawling.
it was millions then.
Yeah, densely populated.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do farmers from the countryside of South and Central Vietnam, what what on earth do they m- that's I mean that's culture. We get people from Iowa come to Minnesota and they don't know what to do. Like
Well,
and I know
the
so what did like how do you go from being a like that's huge. That's a massive change. Like did your dad tell stories of what that was like for them to move from that sparsely populated area into uh, a mega metropolis? What did
well
your
the
grandfather and grandmother do?
yeah. So the only thing they knew was a better life, a better opportunity for their kids, for my dad and his siblings. And so my grandfather, uh, basically a taxi driver, in the big city, just to make a living and to support and to provide for the kids. So the sacrifice was done. Get out of the countryside, something that you grew up knowing, and then taking a risk and bettering yourself and bettering for mainly your kids and the offspring. From that standpoint.
I'm just now having you brought up that image of your father, herding water buffalo and working rice fields. I'm now trying to picture your grandfather driving a water buffalo, pulling a cart as a taxi driver is what I'm trying to imagine. And I know it's not true, but that's just like that had like the culture shock alone of going from an area where you probably didn't see that much vehicular traffic
Yeah.
to it's everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That
I had I since then I went back to Vietnam several times. Love it. Both the city and countryside has their own unique charm, but yeah, the Saigon right now densely populated and just enormous traffic and all of that. So um, the big city. that kind of thing.
Wow. Just
Yeah.
so here are this farm family moving into what was, like the, largest metro, you know, um, area in one of the largest in Southeast Asia. And your dad ends up excelling to a point where he's, wins this lot. I don't know how much of a win that is ultimately, but I mean, it worked out well for him, I suppose, in the end. But he ends up joining the Vietnamese military during this conflict, taking up arms to defend the liberty-minded, the freedom-minded aspects of Vietnam. Was it? Did he say much about what it was like to transfer from being basically a vassal state of France, because that was the French were in control for the longest time, and they kind of abandoned everything and left the Vietnamese people on their own and with some American aid. Did he talk much about that? Was he in the military when all of this started to happen, or did he join after France left? Was it?
Yeah. No, he didn't talk too much about it, but with regards to back in the Korean War that the U.S. was involved in, and then of course during that same time frame, I know for sure he talked about the some of the cruelties that the Japanese military folks had done, in front of his own eyes, and so that I do remember him sharing with me, as well as some of the stories that I'm finally getting a chance to read more in detail in the book. And mind you, when he wrote this in Vietnamese, I never got the chance to my Vietnamese coming here, when I was 6.5, uh, non-existent. And so as I got the chance to reading it now and putting the book together now in English, it's like, okay, I get a little bit more detail about some of his earlier life and his life growing up.
So he ends up in the States, learning to fly at Fort Rucker in Alabama. Boy, that had to have been something.
Oh yeah, loved it.
Who's this little Asian guy showing up in Fort Rucker, Alabama? That he had to be one of what?
Oh, there's I think
dozen?
no, there's probably a group of Vietnamese trainees that came.
So he wasn't completely alone.
No.
That's
Yeah, I got pictures, family pictures that he kept. So yeah, there's a group of them that came and trained.
what was his English like at the time?
Had to start learning quickly, and so that came in the English that he did learn earlier in the 60s came in handy in 1975 when we finally came back to after the leaving to Camp Pendleton, and we got a chance to make a little bit of money at the camp there, being a translator. So it helped out.
That's it just I'm just trying to picture, showing up at this, army installation with next to no English skills and getting told you're going to fly that big green thing over there.
Yeah, right.
And all in English.
All the technical terms in terms of getting into cyclic and all of those terminologies. Yeah, you got to be pretty sharp to pick.
How long was he here learning?
Oh, you mean in the 60s?
Yeah.
I think like a few months at a time. I think a few months at a time.
That seems about right, because when I worked at the U.S. Embassy, for those military members who were going to come here to train, they had to first take an aptitude test to see if they were smart enough. Then they would take a language test, and if they couldn't pass the language test, they would put them into a school in Maryland to learn English, or at least a level of English where they knew they could be able to learn everything they needed to.
But I just want to let that people to steep in that for a minute. You have somebody, you yank them. I mean, and he volunteered, so it's not like you like, just somebody like snatched him off the street. We're not talking about Ukraine. Where he volunteers to join the South Vietnamese military, gets tabbed to come to the United States, and he learns enough English and learns to fly in just a few months. We've got American-raised pilots that have a hard enough time speaking English that are in school for much longer. And so
Let me preface that it may be longer than a few months. I didn't get the chance to get into like how long he actually stayed. I can talk to my mom and she'll let me know. But yeah. I mean, he did that. He did that
I'm
twice.
still impressed.
63 and 69.
Yeah. I'm still very impressed because Skipper and I struggle with English most days. So he comes to the States, he learns to fly. What did he learn on? Do you know?
Oh, the trainer. There's some pictures that we have later on in the presentation here. All sorts. Some of the for sure in the end, the CH-47, but the UH-1 was one among a few others that he flew. Yeah.
Good old Huey.
Yeah.
So go. I'm sorry. I distracted you from your presentation just
problem.
because I wanted all this. Like to me, that's the even more fascinating, is the life that led him to this place, because it says a lot about him as an individual. What he had gone through, I think, really equipped him, um, and prepared him to be able to do what he did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead. You were on the
Yeah.
stream of the presentation. I
Yeah,
will be
no problem. These
quiet
are
now.
these are all great questions you're asking in terms of just who the man is and what philosophy and background and education. So great questions. But as we circle back on the country itself and April 29 and just we see the tank in Time Life magazine or in many of the images, tank rolling in to the Capitol and taking over. Just absolute chaos around this time frame here, April 29, April 30. And so again, the iconic images of people trying to get up into the building there. This isn't the building of the embassy, but they talk as if it was, and trying to hop on a helicopter to fly out. And so let me hop on to the next one here. Okay. So the last few weeks before that actual April 29th, my dad knew that we had lived on a military base, Bingwa. It's about half hour, 45 minutes away from Saigon, and that military base, was a hot zone. So he wanted to make sure that his family was safe. So he moved us to grandma's house in Saigon. And he told my mom that if anything should happen and all things just fall apart, uh, get the bags ready, get the kids ready. And by that time, 75, I was 6.5. I got a younger brother, Mecca, my baby sister, 6-month-old sister Mina, and we were staying at grandma's house. And I remember as the night before my dad came, all over the city, bombs, guns just being dropped everywhere around the city. The main airport, Tungsangyuk, had already been blown up, so there's no way you get planes in and out during the last days there. And so he knew that at this point in time there was really no other way but to go option B, knowing that his commanding officers and his superiors already took off with their family, By this time, the North, the communists, the insurgents was just too strong, circling the city, and there was no other way but to get the heck out of there. And so he jokingly called his helicopter, his horse. Right by this time, a maverick, grab the horse, go get your family, and get out of town. And so that's basically what he did was just uh, hovered uh, the Chinook, uh, flew out to the city and landed in front of my. Back then, there was a playfield big enough for the Chinook, the CH-47, to land and land down. And back, back door opened up. My mom grabbed little baby sister and myself. We all ran in, and this CH-47 we all know is thunderous loud. You can hear it from miles away coming. And so everybody ran in, and the uh, many of the homes around the neighborhood there, the roof blew up, and roof flew everywhere. Military police started to approach the Chinook as we were running in the back. And once everyone was in, co-pilot gave the thumbs up, and my dad lifted that thing up, got the heck out of there. And the thought was to meet up with the other 3 or 4 Chinooks pilots with their own family, and to stock up on food and ration, fly south, try to find a remote island or someplace just to buy time and figure things out.
I
Because
think if I could, I
Yeah.
want people, especially old folks like you and I, Skipper's not old, quite that old. I would have been 5.
Mm.
You were 6.5.
Mhm.
So we're in that
Yeah.
same, thinking
Same-
about it
same
from
age.
thinking about that from the perspective, 1975. Now I want everybody who's listening to this, whether it's right now or later on, I want you to think about yourself at 5 years old and the sheer overwhelming reality of what it would be like to have your dad show up, pick you up, like literally pick you up to escape with whatever you had on your body at the time and leave behind your entire existence at that age. It's one thing as an adult to go, okay, here, this is this calculated thing I'm going to do. This is how we're going to do it. It's another thing to process what that's like for a family with children, infants, and barely old enough to start school in the American mindset. Just being picked up and yanked into the sky and away from everything you had ever known as a child. That just mind-blowing, and one that your dad was able to pull that off in the midst of incessant bombing, ceaseless gunfire, and able to get in there and get you guys says so much about his character by itself. Just it's amazing the kind of character that a man would have to be able to do that at such a time.
Yeah. He, as he said, he had to do what you had to do. The human spirit, the willingness to survive, the need to protect your family, all of that is very instinctual. And so applying all of his intelligence, communication, cleverness, all of that had to come into play. And but in his heart of heart, he's a soldier, listened to his commanding officer. He waited till the very last moment to break protocol and to start, hey, my CEO's gone, his family's gone, all of the elites in the South military, they're all, we've got to, guys, we got to go save our own, family here. This is the Wild West now, and got to do what we got to do, And so he was fortunate to have the opportunity to have his horse. Many other Vietnamese families and soldiers didn't have that opportunity. So just
Did his
you know,
co-pilot have family in the area as well, or was it
yeah,
just
yeah,
a
yeah. He had a co-pilot, mechanic on board, gunner, the full
were
crew, and their girlfriends. Or my dad was one of the older folks that had family and kids. So
it, was anybody else from from that crew, that aircraft crew, from that horse, were any of them able to get their family members out at that time, or was it like we have one stop, or and that's all we can spare?
no, no, yeah, the many of the crew members that stuck with him um, were able to get out with him. And the Chinook, this is him. This is the Chinook that we have. I mean that you're seeing here. Um, and in the Chinook flying out, we'll get to that. We'll get to that part, flying out to the ocean. Uh, but in there's about 15, 16 people, families, kids, all
Wow.
of that. Yeah. Um,
And then he found literally the smallest moving landing pad in the history
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
naval aviation. Like literally, I don't know that you could land a drone on that thing today. Like, just, and
Um,
yet here he is. How far out to sea were you guys before you found the Kirk?
so let me before I get to that, I'll answer
Yep.
that one. But the thinking here was to, again, load up on food, all of that. Uh, you know, get out of town. Uh, but at the same time, on the radio and the communication, he knew many of the U.S. military were still around, obviously, to uh, help many of the Americans and then the folks in the embassy get out to the Pacific and out to many of these U.S. Navy ships out there. So he knew that there were ships out there, and therefore took the chance to uh, head out towards the to the Pacific in hopes that maybe there'd be a carrier or something big enough for him to land. But no guarantees. He just took a chance and said, "What the heck? Let's go for it." And so headed out in that direction. And the first one that he saw was out in the distance. He approached it, uh, not knowing if if it was big enough, not knowing if he had enough gas to make it out and back. There's nothing available. And again, these Chinooks, they were not meant so much to go out in the Pacific, so
No.
there was no life preserve types of water safety devices or anything like that. And therefore, the picture you see here, one of his crewmen there had to dump water out so that that white container could be used as a flotation device, right? Uh, if for some reason, again, ran out of gas or couldn't find an opportunity to land, then figure out some way to float.
And
But
if there's one aircraft in the history of the world that should not fly, it's the Chinook. It makes no
physics,
sense.
exactly, exactly.
It's just aeronautically, the guy who designed that, I don't know if he should be taken out back and smacked around or applauded for being a genius, because I've jumped out of one of those things and I felt safer jumping out of it than I did getting on it. So.
I love your commentaries, TC. Love it.
It's nice of you to say that while we're recording.
Yeah.
So let's see. What was that like for you guys? Because that had to have been the first time you ever experienced anything like that.
Well, again, I've been sharing this story as a kid, right? I grew up on the military base, guns, big military armament, grenades laying around the barracks. So I grew up. The smell of jet fuel. I know that smell. I know that smell of jet fuel growing up. It brings back memories. All of that. So to me, it was. If you ask my mom the same question, it'd be a different form of fear and anxiety from her. But for me as a young boy, this was just part of the adventure and going out there. But I'm telling you, like every adult in that Chinook helicopter that you're seeing there was full of fear, anxiety, and everything else in between. And so as we approached the ship, my dad backed off on the didn't want to come at it hot, right? Didn't want to come aggressive, and so circled the ship several times, and the Navy crewmen below, obviously they didn't know if the Chinook helicopter, if he was a communist or an enemy of some sort, and so they had some guns pointed at him. Like, we got our eye on you. And so my dad, continued. He didn't give up. He didn't back away. He kept circling it, right? Circled it. And there's an image in the picture. And again, these are all the video image, courtesy of the U.S. Navy. My mom held my 6-month-old baby sister up onto the window there to say, "Hey, we've got kids on board here, so we need help.
Please don't shoot."
Yeah, please don't shoot.
There again too, being in that aircraft and in such a time of turmoil and chaos, like you are subject to being fired upon by both the U.S. and by surface to air missiles from the advancing insurgents, the communists. That just to the fortunately you get out to the insurgents didn't really have a navy, which is nice. But I mean, even just taking off out of Saigon, like there was absolutely not a moment where you weren't in pure peril entire time. It's just from both sides, from absolutely both sides. Fortunately, the Chinook's a very recognizable American aircraft, very, very, very recognizable. Like, one when you've seen one. But that had to. How long? So how long did they circle before they were able to get you guys down?
I think my dad said at least it felt like an eternity, or probably just because it felt a long time. It felt a long time, and but he did to answer that. Just to add some color to what you just mentioned, that he one time he told me one time story. He did get shot down, and his Chinook crashed into the ground, and basically him and his crewmen had to take off their military gear to blend in and look like civilians, because otherwise the Viet Cong would have probably snatched him up and taken him away. So he has been shot down before and survived and ran away from that. But
I'm more impressed that he survived a Chinook landing. Period. I just
but in this context here, finally was able to get on the radio and with the captain. And so mind you, we did not know the name of the ship or the name of the captain until many years later.
Wow.
But the name of this ship is the USS Kirk, the almighty USS Kirk. And until the day I die, we'll never forget that name. And the name of Captain Paul Jacobs. Amazing man. And he was able to communicate with my dad on the radio. So with English coming back, it helped to at least, communicate, "Hey, I'm here. I need help." And Captain Paul Jacobs was willing to provide that assistance, and told his crewmen to huddle around, figure things out. This ship at this moment in time was still moving at around 5 knots, to keep direction, swells, wind, and everything else. So he couldn't simply stop. And if he did stop, where would my dad land? Look at the back stern there. It's tiny. This ship, we found out later on, was a submarine destroyer, a frigate.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a frigate. So
yep. And it was meant to look for a submarine, and it had all of the radar, sonar, all of the expensive equipment, the high tech technology back then. And so if my dad were to try to land or get closer somehow, some way, and knock a mast or hit an antenna, it would put the ship out of commission quickly. And so, um, him and the Captain Jacobs, had to figure things out. Eventually, the captain, was able to allow him to hover behind the back there, that stern there, where you see the circle with the X there. And my dad was able to hover behind while the ship was moving, and keep that Chinook going sideways at a distance of about 10 or 15 feet above the deck there. And so I throughout this whole story, I two or three groups of people that I want to honor and acknowledge. Number one, my father, the risk that he took, all of that, the heroism that he took, but also the effort, and the compassion and the humanitarian, that the Captain Paul Jacobs and the crew of the USS Kirk, to take the risk and help our family out. And so the thinking here was to open the starboard door, and the folks inside, myself, family, crew members, and everything, would jump out. And so my dad had to keep the Chinook about 10, 15 feet above above the flight deck, and below the flight deck were, of course, the crewmen below. So as I said in the film 10 years ago, one by one we jump. And I can growing up as a kid, right? We all have moments where we remember, parts here and there of our childhood, and this is one of those things that stayed with me, and throughout all the years, just remembering this whole experience, and looking down and seeing the folks, the crew below, catching this. And so well, my mom had to drop my baby sister down below, and that gentleman's name is Mr. Kent Chipman, one of those individuals that I just grateful, right place at the right time, brave. If anything would swell, port control, all of that, the helicopter could have smashed the folks below. So just divine intervention and luck, everything else, skill, all of that, just cooperation, communication, teamwork, all of that had to just come into play. So eventually, everybody in the Chinook left. My dad told the co-pilot to do one last check and make sure everybody was, jumped out, and then told the co-pilot to leave, jump. And I remember landing down on the deck, and they had to, quickly move us inside. Didn't want kids and folks running out on the deck there. But the last thing that I remember and seeing with my own eyes was my dad hovering away. At this time, like, where's he going at this point? So so this picture here that you see here is the actual my dad's Chinook, and
that's a picture taken from the Kirk.
that is correct. That's
Wow.
correct. Yeah. So there he is hovering, and folks telling him to, shoo, stay away, right? At this time, we see, and again, in all the publications and media, many of the smaller Hueys, they were able to land on ships like the USS Kirk, and then quickly the crewmen below would push these helicopters. million or whatever the cost was back then into the ocean so that the next helicopter could land. But in this case, my dad's helicopter is just simply too big. And so let me move on there. Yeah. So there he is, basically just approaching, and then the folks below were saying, "Hey, back off, little too big." There we see a picture of my sister, little 7-month-old, looking through the window, and everybody just looking down. At this point, there is Captain Paul Jacobs. I want to just show this picture, and just incredible. He was all hands on. He didn't delegate from behind some comfortable chair. He was out there working with his crew. Shows you the kind of character Mr. Paul Jacob was at this time. And
I do want to point out the guy in the foreground just doing what most Navy deckhands do, and just kind of watching everybody else work. So. I'm kidding. I'm sorry, but I always like to point out that the captain is out of uniform, and we should probably have him written up for that.
TC, you are terrible.
You have no idea, but so this is your first experience with with in-depth experience with Americans right here. Like, yeah, I'm sure you had contact with them to some degree via military contact.
Yeah, the base and all that stuff.
Yeah, with the base, but this is your first experience of really this is real. This is we are not going home.
Exactly.
Dad dropped us here, and now he's hovering away. Do you remember a feeling or a sense of questioning of where's Dad going in this moment? What's going to happen to my dad? Or was there still some of that youthful excitement of, wow, that was really cool? And how did they eventually get your dad on board and his co-pilot?
Yeah, all of that, right? In terms of the excitement, the thrill of stepping onto and jumping out. I love climbing trees. There's any young boy would be, jumping out of a helicopter, all of that. I grew up a lot flying with my dad in helicopters, again, living on the barrack and the military base. But so jumping out of a helicopter, okay, new experience, excitement, but at the same time, seeing the fear and the worry in my mom. Yeah, all of that as well, for sure.
I'm guessing your dad had to have ditched that thing.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So let me, we'll get to that. But as you can see here, a painting from Adam Colts. We got a picture of this. And this particular they didn't have the picture or the video of us jumping. But in my heart of heart, I know they have it somewhere in the military, in the Navy. I know it. But in any event, this is a drawing of it, and the New York Times did a cartoon sort of a character, story as well back then, and showing my mom dropping the baby down from the deck there, and you can see how small the deck is, the narrow deck is. This is a USS Kirk picture itself, so it's a small back deck. 10-10-10-10-87 USS Kirk. So this picture here, I'm showing that if my dad, wasn't fortunate enough, didn't leave, he would have been caught by the communists and sent to what they call a re-education camp. And with his rank, he lieutenant colonel, he would have been at least 12, 15 years. Family members that were in the military, had to deal with ordeal like this after, after the communists would have captured you. But in this case, to answer your question, after everybody jumped off, the only thing that there's no way in hell that he was going to go back, to back to land. His family was on this ship. He had to figure out some way, somehow to get off his horse and reunite with his family. And so what he did was just hover about 100 yards or so, as you see in the picture here, and he hovered and basically took off all of his gear, his gun, boots, with laces, and his flak, his uniform and all of that. The only thing that he regret not doing was telling his co-pilot to at least, hold the Chinook steady for him, give him 5 minutes so that he can take off his gear, before telling the co-pilot to jump. But he said that if he had to do it over again, he probably would have asked his co-pilot to just keep it steady for him to remove his stuff before. So it took him.
He booted his co-pilot before he even got himself ready.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
I don't. For those that have never been in the military, those that have never been on a Chinook or actually been up close watching these things, those props, the fore and aft prop, those things are as long as the aircraft,
and they're right there. They are right there.
And the way they're timed, the timing on the spatial timing on those things is so precise that they intertwine with one another. They pass one another as they're rotating. There's not like one that's up above and one that's down below, and then they just no. They are perfectly aligned and they're perfectly timed that they spin. And the airframe of the Chinook is designed to bend. It bends. And when you make contact with the ground, everything bounces. And when you hit the water, the likelihood that those props don't tear that aircraft apart and take you with it, it's mind-boggling what he had to have done to not only just hold it over the deck long enough to get all of the passengers off and all the crew, but himself and the co-pilot, but to then take it over, set it in the water and get away without getting killed in that moment. We need more pilots like that today, because those things are at their, like I said, they should not fly. They should not be able to stay in the air. And I'm just, I hope this gets people at least enough intrigued to go and check out the website and the book and the documentary alone, because we could do this for 3 hours. We could easily do this for 3 hours. But so your dad eventually got off.
Yeah. So he's sitting there at this time, about 5 or some odd minutes, or 3 or 5 minutes. He said, just again, ripping everything off, getting down to his undergarment, and he opened the port door right next to him, and gave the thumbs up. At this time, the Captain Paul Jacobs sent a little skiff out on the water there, just in preparation for either picking up him alive or picking him up dead. Either one of those two choices or outcomes. And so he gave the thumbs up that he was ready, and basically with his right foot, the control, the stick there, kicked the stick so that it would lean to the starboard side, the right side, and jammed it hard enough so that he was able to jump to his left out the window into the water. And so as he did that, he tried to, the salt water's buoyant, and so kept
Yeah.
pushing him back up several times. But on the third or fourth attempt, finally was able to dive deep enough into the water, and just behind him was just thunderous activity, commotion. The shrapnel blades or anything, or the dynamics of this event could have flipped the Chinook back on top of him. Anything could have happened. And so just thank God, thank the universe that everything, ended up the way it did, where there he is.
There it is.
That's him right there in the circle there.
Yeah,
Got-
what you're seeing there is the effects of a Chinook crash. It's not they tear themselves apart when they go down. That Jiminy's. And so where was it? His co-pilot was already in the skiff at this point, I assume.
No, the co-pilot's already on the ship. He remember the co-pilot jumped out with everyone else. It was
So
just
this
him.
was all done solo.
Oh, this
Yeah,
was
yeah.
all done. So I misunderstood that. So he.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, that's not your fault. So he literally did this all by himself. Like it wasn't just him and his co-pilot. Holy smokes!
Yeah, the part where I was kind of my dad was kidding or joking, like he should have, if he known it, he would have ditched it like this. He would have told his co-pilot to at least give him 5 minutes, and then the co-pilot would have jumped onto the deck below, right? Just so that gives him time to get down to his undergarment. But yeah, it's just him at this point, and there he is trying to paddle away or swim away quickly, rooster tail with his legs there in that circle, the red circle there. Yeah,
That's just absolutely astounding.
and then things settled down. I remember Mr. Kent Shipman. We met, we shook hands, and again, we had a reunion, first reunion with him in 2010. Met Captain Paul Jacobs, Mr. Kent Shipman, Hugh Doyle, all of these folks that were on the ship, shook their hand, thanked him. And Mr. Kent Shipman said that he's a Texan, and he said he reminded him. Well, first off, he saw they saw red in the water, ended up being hydraulic fluid, but at the same time, Mr. Shipman was saying that the Chinook upside down looked like an armadillo, small little legs, and it just upside down like that. So, but there's my dad just sitting there bopping, waiting, and play a little snippet here. This was the American Experience produced the Last Days in Vietnam with Rory Kennedy, and this was part of a little snippet out of the film there. And there's my dad, boxer shorts and stuff. My mom kept that boxer and that shirt for many years, and when he retired from Boeing in early 2000, 1999, somewhere around there, made a little gift box for him.
Wow.
So there he is, kind of a little talking with the Captain Paul Jacobs, a little debrief. Yeah, this was first step in
the military. Hey, we just pulled your ass out of the water. Now we're going to give you a debriefing. That's what. Before you do anything else, who the hell are you? And are you trying to sabotage our ship? That's what.
I didn't mean to use that formal word, but you know, like, what were you thinking, and what's going on, or all of that. He was joking as well, but absolute truth. The first thing that he wanted wasn't so. Hey, where's my wife and family? He says, hey, can you guys give me a cigarette? I gotta calm the F down, man. It's like the adrenaline and the anxiety leading up to this point. He just needed that cigarette. That was the first thing that he asked for.
I'm trying to, and you'll have to forgive me, Mickey, but I'm just hearing this in that quintessential thick Vietnamese accent. Like asking for a cigarette. I'm just.
Yeah.
Oh. I'm just.
So yeah,
and like 15 people all stepped up and had cigarettes for him, right? Like,
yeah.
everybody in the military smoked back then, like everyone, because it
Yeah.
was the only excuse you had to be able to like take a break. So they all had cigarettes. Oh, Skipper, your camera is not focusing today, by the way.
So I just want to again say thank you to Captain Paul Jacobs and the crew of the USS Kirk. If it wasn't for them there at that moment in time, and thank God, and my dad, just wouldn't be here to share the story today. So
how long were you guys on the Kirk?
we were on the Kirk for less than 24 hours, and so there was no phone numbers, there was no, hey, what's your Instagram, none of that, right? There, lost in the name that just yeah, and started from zero, started day one again. And the USS Kirk had to stay in the area to surveil. We had to go on to a larger ship, and then eventually went to Guam, and then was there for a couple days, and then from Guam over to Wake Island for a month, and then from there flew into Hawaii for a day, and then from Hawaii got into Camp Pendleton. So within the ditch all the way to Camp Pendleton, a couple months of just transition.
Wow.
Yeah, and then in Camp Pendleton there for a month and a half or so, and then a church here in Bellevue, Cross of Christ Lutheran Church, about half hour away from Seattle, sponsored our family. And so, again, if it wasn't for the help and the support and the compassion of not only the ship, the captain, but the church here, would have been a difficult experience for us. So thank you to all that helped us and our family along the journey. And again, I share this story.
Your first experience on actual American soil was Hawaii.
Yeah. Well, you can say, well, yeah, to be technical, the 50 state, right? But Wake and Guam are part of U.S. territory.
Right. But then they put you on Pendleton.
Yeah.
I would have immediately said, please take me back. What are those Americans? Because they don't speak the same language as the rest of you.
Stop making fun of my Marines.
But so you have a church sponsor you out of Seattle, and I'm there again. I'm just gonna be quintessential American. That had to have been hell. Seattle from Saigon. It's like you get Saigon, Guam, Wake Island, Hawaii, Camp Pendleton to cold rain all the time, just all the time. Like no sun, no, there's mountains everywhere with trees you've never seen before in your life. You're like
TC, you're not far
falling
off.
from the tops of trees. Just it's the way it is. It's just Seattle. It's just middle of summer. Ice is falling on people. Like that had to have been culture shock by itself.
You're dead on. You're dead on. 9 months out of the year, it's just rainy, depressing. It's just But we call this home. I call this home. So.
He says dad ends up going to work for. Your dad goes to work for Boeing.
Yeah. So he, the first thing he did was went back to school, study electronics, and after a few jobs here and there, got into Boeing. And so both my mom and my dad retired from Boeing. My dad worked on he got military, background clearance. He worked on ICBMs and projects like that within Boeing as a technician. So again, thank you to Boeing.
So he's basically an electrical engineer.
Technically a technician, not so much an engineer from this.
But still, I mean,
you're kind, TC, with your words. I appreciate that.
That just is like, I just want there again. This is one of those moments. I just want as Americans, the idea, the concept of you've just fled your homeland, a country that you're fighting for, trying to preserve it from a fall and and you flee in chaos. You literally throw everything that you have that's precious to you out into the world. You settle into a place where you have nothing in common with anyone, and you manage to step up to the plate, go back to college, or go to college, and plug yourself into the American dream in a way that Americans never have.
Yeah,
for
no,
the most part. Americans
technical
just
school.
don't.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Technical school, but still, you plug yourself into the American dream in a way that most Americans never will. They just take it all for granted. They just take it all for granted. And your dad manages to make a life out of chaos and turmoil in a way that a lot of people just will never grasp or have a conception of.
Even I struggle with his living up to what he did, even as his own son. So not only my dad, but my mom had to start over again from scratch. My mom had to relearn the learn the language, not relearn. Yeah.
That had to be really hard, like if you come home with like a report card with the C and your mom's like, "Oh, well, your dad flew flew a helicopter out of Vietnam."
Well, that's another sort of, A minus is never good enough. I grew up. Yeah.
She was that mom.
Yeah. That's another podcast.
and
they put the bar so high. They put the bar so high for me.
I have a friend that hosts a podcast that's about that. So that kind of stuff. And I'm just seeing you walk in with your American report card written in English with an A minus, and I am already imagining the Vietnamese rant.
Yeah.
As she's walking around the kitchen, basically saying, "Just wait till your dad gets home."
Oh yeah, you're absolutely correct. It was a very high bar. Then just yeah. But at the same time, it's like if you had a dream, if you have a wherewithal, if you have a desire, America was the place to achieve that. That the American dream back then. From that standpoint, things may shift. Things may be a little different today, 50 years later. But that American dream back then was very, very real. So
you need to put Shannon's comment up. Shannon's.
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that.
Now,
are your parents still with us, or?
My mom is. My dad passed away in 2013, Alzheimer's, and so, but when he had free time, during everything settled down, years later, he had free time. He loves to write. He loves short little stories here and there. And again, I told you earlier in this conversation, it was published in many of the Vietnamese newspapers. And so put all this together for him. And in 2009, again, these are the stories that I grew up as a kid around the dinner table. As my dad, remember, stepping off the deck, went inside, didn't see anything, but he shared the story with his buddies, right? About what he did, what they military war stories around, cigarette and a beer, cigarette and coffee every time he sees buddies. And so this was a story that, and as a kid, around the dinner table or outside, my ears would always listen to what my dad would say. So I remember this growing up as a kid, these stories of what, how he ditched it, and the other stories leading up to that, and post that as well. And so this was a story shared among our family and some close friends, and then the stories that he wrote in the newspaper. It's a Vietnamese sort of a community story.
Mhm.
And in 2009, I'm sitting at work and I get an email from my mom. Her English isn't very strong enough to get by, but she forwards me this email, and at the bottom of the email was a email from the U.S. Navy, and it just so happened that the gentleman who initiated this email, his name was Mr. Jan Herman, another name that I want to just be grateful for and appreciate and give kudos, a shout out to Mr. Jan Herman, U.S. Navy historian. And his task back then, 2008, 2009, was to look at, the military activity, how the Navy would, and learn what worked, what didn't during the Vietnam era war. And he discovered this story about the USS Kirk and the ditch from the Chinook helicopter. And one of the things he wanted to figure out or find out was who was a pilot. And so he put this email together and put it out to the Virginia Vietnamese community. And somehow, some way, the story, got forwarded on to my mom. By this time, my dad was in the thick of Alzheimer's, so he couldn't reply. But I saw it, and it's like, oh my God, Mom, we finally got pictures of what Dad was saying. He wasn't lying when he said what he, ditched it. We got pictures. It's like the joke that I would say. It's like when you go fishing with your buddy. Hey man, I caught like a 25-pound, lingcod. Oh yeah, where's your picture? We got pictures, we got video. It's like, holy Toledo. So from then onward, the U.S. Navy, Mr. Jan Herman, put together the Lucky Few documentary, and it was finally aired. Or not, it was finally released in 2010, and we got invited to go to the USS Kirk reunion. And oh wow, it was, it's a total wow experience. The chance to shake and say thank you to the captain and to many of the crew member. And I remember my dad was in a wheelchair in 2010, and the painting that you saw from Mr. Adam Colts there, he painted it. Captain Paul Jacobs, presented that painting as a souvenir to my dad, our family. And as I rolled my dad up to the podium, to folks in the crowd were clapping, and in the wheelchair coming up to the podium there, my dad basically was trying to work his way out of the wheelchair, and I kind of like, hey Dad, just no, don't worry, just but he got up. He was able to muster enough mental capacity, dementia and everything at this point, but just enough to stand up right out of his wheelchair and to a simple salute to the captain and the crew. And I knew that it came full circle for him in terms of just thanking the captain and the ship. And yeah.
I just I want so much for people to take away from this, um how completely blessed as Americans we are, white, black, native, First Nations, Asians, Asian Pacific, whatever the case might be. Just how blessed we are to have been born and raised here and not had to have experienced what your family went through, what your dad in particular went through, what your mom in particular went through. And I have a person that I listen to. He's a political philosopher, and he talks an awful lot. And you had mentioned some of the division here in the country. Um, it's really hard to get worked up and bent out of shape about microaggressions when you've lost almost everything and had to start over. And that's what's so inspiring about your family story. This isn't just about your dad, about this Vietnamese lieutenant colonel pilot who did an amazing thing just one time in his life. This is his entire life. And it's your entire family that should actually be an inspiration to all Americans. You guys are all a living, breathing example of what it means to excel when all the odds are against you. Your parents could have fallen back on, we're foreigners. We have no skills. We have no language commonality. We have no cultural commonality with any of these people. Just take care of us. We did what we did. We got here. Now take care of us. And that wasn't good enough for your dad. That wasn't good enough for your mom. And I can't imagine how proud you must be of your family, in particular of your parents, to have come here and, even if they didn't, dad didn't retire a millionaire, whatever, he retired having accomplished the as you said earlier, the actual American dream, at least as it once was. What it could be again if people would just open their eyes and stop taking everything for granted. So, Miki, thank you so much for sharing that with us and telling us about it, and for our audience to be able to hear this. Thank you for being part of our country, and making sure that the story doesn't fade away. Do you have anything you'd like to tell the audience? Now.
Yeah, I just want to note that this was my family's story. There are other Vietnamese boat people stories or refugee stories that horrific, difficult to hear. When we talk about PTSD, many of these other folks that were not as fortunate or blessed as my father, my family, they had to go through their own struggle. But I'm sharing this from our family's perspective, and so grateful for my mom and dad. So grateful for, again, the captain and the church and the crew. Just very grateful to be there, my mom and dad's son. So I'm just honoring my dad, through continuing with this story in hopes that it may put a little inspiration or a little bit of light, a little bit of positivity into just stories these days. So again, thank you, TC and Mike Skipper, for the opportunity to share this family story with you and your audience.
Oh,
How's
thank you.
how's your Vietnamese?
Terrible. Honest. Grew up here, first grade here, all white high school, assimilated quickly, had to assimilate quickly, got called all sorts of derogatory names growing up. So, I had my share of ups and downs, obviously here, but at the end of it all, you figure out, you find a way and to, survive and to work. I love your platform, in terms of your subjects on veterans and the issues that veterans face today, the PTSD, all of those types of things. It's fantastic community. You're not alone. Lean on others. platforms like this to share, know that others, are out there similar to, to your struggles. And so, kudos to both of you for this platform.
How hard is it when you have friends that are like, "Hey, take me to your favorite Vietnamese restaurant"? Do you just go? Do you just go? No, we don't. We
Well,
don't go to Vietnam.
well, to the comment you brought up, yeah, I asked my mom and how come we didn't go down to LA or someplace warmer like Houston or San Jose, right? They got better Vietnamese variety down there than here. So I hope that answers your your question. But there's a few Vietnamese places around here.
You ever try to like recreate mom's recipes, or did mom just give up and learn to cook like an American?
No, we do it all: Mexican, Italian, Vietnamese, everything. America is the melting point, pot from that standpoint.
One of my favorite restaurants.
And don't say pho. Don't take. There's a lot of other dishes besides pho.
Pho, yeah. Everybody think, it's very American. One of my favorite restaurants in our area is a really good Italian eatery, and it's owned and operated and staffed by Mexicans. So, like, so
there you go.
But man, so I'm going to ask one more, and then I know we probably got to get you out of here. What is your given name?
Nguyen đến Thanh Sơn. But
say that again.
Nguyen.
Nguyen is your surname in English.
In Vietnamese, the last name goes first.
It's
flipped through. That's why the website is Nguyen Van Ba. But it's Nguyen đến Thanh Sơn Mickey. So the nickname Mickey was given.
Yeah. You didn't insist on everybody trying to say your.
No, it's too long.
I can't imagine what it was like trying to get people to not say your name. Nguyen.
Oh, I got it. Yeah, Nguyen.
Nguyen.
Yeah,
Nguyen.
Yeah, it's like every new semester or every new quarter when they do a roll call, like who's it's like Nick. Yeah, here, Nguyen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've got your website. That's what we have down below there.
Yeah, thank you.
I've also put the link for people to purchase the book, which is right here. It's available on Instagram. It's entitled "The Last Flight Out," and you also have your Instagram page, which I did have that right there. So everyone, please go and follow them on Instagram. But everything is available on your website. And we really want you to keep in touch with us. If you end up doing something else, feel free to come back. We just love the story. The fans of the show we're getting a lot of messages and a lot of people watching. So it's an important story, and we thank you for joining us with it.
Yeah. Thank you again, both. I appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate it. One more time, the name of the documentary, and you said it's on Netflix?
Yeah, Last Days in Vietnam.
All right. Really appreciate your time, and tell your mom that we're thankful she tolerated your lack of performance. So
love it.
Skipper,
Well, with that,
I think we're going to toss we're going to toss here in 20 minutes to members only stream
on YouTube.
So if you're on YouTube, so if you're interested and you want to see the next one, it's going to be a great conversation. You can watch it live, members only. We're going to be talking with someone who's been doing some ministry with some of the J6 people, and otherwise, you're going to have to wait until next week when it goes live. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for the members only to start, you could always head over and pay attention to the Freedom Flock. They are hanging out in the cold right now. The temperature is dropping in Minnesota, and the Freedom Flock is heading inside. They about had it with the wind and the cold today. So, Miki, thank you so much for your time. Skipper, take us out of here.
All right. And I just put in the link for Uncle Frank viewer of the show who passed away this week, a Vietnam veteran, a tunnel rat himself. He his family is grieving. If you're so blessed, please go over there and just give them a couple dollars as they go through the funeral process and all of that. And thank you to Miki Nguyen for being here and sharing his great story. Go buy the book, watch the documentary, and as usual, thank you for being worth serving.